This is your World War III update. I got some bad news. There is no ceasefire. There is no partial ceasefire. There is no temporary, partial, prospective, insert adjective here to describe the ceasefire. What you're getting right now is a lot of disinformation and outright deception, and at best, misinformation from people who are greatly misinformed and just simply don't know how to think critically. What's happening right now is that they're trying to buy time. Both sides are trying to defer. So what you have is a very euphemistically characterized deferral of negotiations. Putin's going to call up his commanders and tell them to stop hitting Ukrainian critical infrastructure with drones. What has happened in the last 3 hours since I made this video? Massive bombardments of Ukrainian infrastructure, and the Ukrainians have responded in kind. So while it might be true, because we don't have the transcript of the call, and Trump didn't even make an official statement, which tells you everything you need to know about how this call really went, okay? This call, I don't think, went nearly as good as a lot of people think. What we're being told does not match the reality of what is happening. What we're being told is that there's incremental progress towards developing a framework for possibly entering into negotiations somewhere down the line with certain parts of each party. Nothing's going to happen until somebody wins the war. For Europe and for NATO and the transatlantic alliance as a whole, this is an existential war. And they're not going to stop until they've expended every Slavic individual to fight against other Slavic individuals, because you got to understand, and look, this is forbidden knowledge, okay? This is why this channel is largely shadow banned. They're using Russians to kill Russians. That's what they're doing. Western Europe is leveraging mostly Russian-speaking people. In fact, I'm thinking a lot of those guys who get chased down in Ukraine against their will, that the commissars hit with their van while they're riding their bike, or, strip them away from their screaming children. I think a lot of those guys are probably some of the Russian speakers in Ukraine. And so understand what's happening here. There are very preeminent dark forces that are dictating. I'm not talking, mystical, spiritual, superstitious forces. Maybe, who knows? But this most certainly does look like some sort of bloodletting of sorts. But there are powerful interests that supersede Trump. This is nothing to do with Trump. In fact, disregard everything that the Trump administration says from this point forward. If you haven't learned your lesson yet, then I don't think you ever will. You never will learn. Look at the JFK thing. 30,000 pages of what? Just filler, fluff, nothing burger, red herring, so people can spin themselves to death and get dizzy and pass out on the floor. Nothing is going to come of that, any of that shit. Absolutely nothing. Mark my words, it's pure and utter distraction. Every time they say that they're going to release something, watch what happens on that day. Did gold go to $3,040 today? Yeah, that happened. Are the Iraqis issuing warnings that the U.S. has tipped off their leaders about a potential strike on Iran due to Tehran's unwillingness to negotiate? Yeah, that shit's going down. Is it a coincidence that on the same day that they released the JFK files, they also ramp up the war in Gaza, ramp up the war against Yemen, issue threats against Iran, and have this talk with Putin that Trump didn't even come out and give an official statement about? Because there's nothing to talk about. Nothing happened. The actual reality is terrifying, because what you need to understand is that the mentality of most Ukrainians on the ground, when we talk about the implication of this being World War III, which is something that Trump rightly does get, the Ukrainians don't view it that way. The ones on the ground, they don't actually, for them it is World War III, okay? And so they're not really concerned, and they've said as much. Very notable influencers in the pro-Ukrainian NAFO space have repeatedly said that they don't care if World War III is a potential outcome in the sense that there's a nuclear exchange. They don't care, okay? Now, you need to extrapolate that to their handlers. And their handlers are much bigger than Trump. Look who Trump has been surrounded by. All these guys, whether it's Rubio, Kellogg, Walz, Lindsey Graham, all of these guys have issued scathing critiques of Trump in the past, excoriating him for being a traitor, for everything under the sun. These guys, and this is on, there's video montages of this stuff, okay? All of these hardline warhawk neocons. And all of these guys hated Trump before. Now he's surrounded by them. Why? Is it because Trump is meritocratic and he's just trying to pick the best person for the job? No. It's because I think he has to. Okay? I think that the actual amount of agency that Trump has right now is minimal at best. I mean, look at the dog and pony show, bread and circuses in the Oval Office that we're seeing on a regular basis. Conor McGregor addressing the press from the presidential podium? Are you serious? A guy who legit is a convicted sex offender. Okay? Is that the right terminology? He basically, I don't want to say the R word because then the video will be flagged, but sexual assault. Guilty as charged, right? Addressing a nation of people. You have the JFK nothing burger. Everything, the Epstein thing, the hanging the Constitution on the wall in the White House. Okay, that's great. What now? Like the JFK files, we discover, the CIA wanted to starve Cuba. Oh, you mean the CIA is bad? I never heard that before. What next? It's all just distraction. All of these changes are superficial. They'll give you the wall. That's easy. They'll give you the border thing. They'll deport some people and they'll make they'll grandstand about it. Nothing significant, fundamental that is going to change because the West fundamentally views the destruction of Russia as essential. And this is why the war is ramping up in the shadows. Do you understand that? That right now, the actual reconnaissance missions in the Black Sea that were non-existent for the last 2 years. Under Biden, they stopped doing it. Why? Well, we suspect it's because one of those drones was actually brought down by the Russians. We know that one was brought down when they took it down. I believe it was in 2022. They spilled fuel on it, and that brought one of them down. And then the Russians actually captured that one. Remember that? And possibly even are in the process of reverse engineering if they even need to, if it's comparable technology. But they also brought down another one. One went off the radar, flight radar, and they suspect that it was shot down and that was a red line for Putin. Now they're flying not just one, they're flying rivet joints in the Black Sea, okay, which are much more capable intelligence gathering planes. Now, if Trump wanted to end this war, he could have just stuck to his guns. I honestly don't even know if there was any substantial drawdown of resources and intelligence shared with Ukraine. I'm actually starting to think that that was all just theatrics because you really didn't see Russia throughout that period of time celebrating that whatsoever. What else is happening? They're continuing weapon flows. Ukraine, Russia continue to exchange fire on critical infrastructure. There was supposed to be some call to the commanders by Vladimir Putin to say, hey, you guys need to stop bombing Ukraine's critical infrastructure today. Within an hour of this meeting concluding, and we don't have an official transcript, we just have a condensed synopsis of what was said by the White House, so we don't really know. We're only getting our side of it. The Russians are not really saying much about it. They're not really hyping it up. Trump didn't even give a statement about it. That tells you everything you need to know. This is all just deception. This war is actually getting worse behind the scenes. It's getting worse, okay? I believe that they're trying to use these dilatory tactics to just delay and slow things down a little bit. But make no mistake about it, Europe, even if even if we assume that Trump has some level of control in this situation, the power behind Zelensky is far more preeminent than Trump, okay? If you go on YouTube, which is an order of magnitude bigger than any other influential platform on the internet, bar none, 10 times more influential than X, I can tell you right now that the pro-Ukrainian narrative is pumped to the tune of at least, and this is probably a conservative estimate, I would say 4 to 10 times. Gets 4 to 10 times the impressions. Okay, so the pro-Ukrainian narrative, contrary to what you might see in your filter bubble, in your algorithm, which is just serving you more of the same, and you start to mistakenly believe that you're actually getting a general cross-section of the points of view of the populace, but you're not. You're just getting your own filter bubble through this recursive algorithm that gives you more and more of what you're looking for. Right now, the overwhelming support, whether it's in Europe and even North America to a large extent, still is in support of Ukraine. Okay, I believe it or not, it actually is. Now, and that can change so easily. It can change with one little false flag incident. We know how fickle the population is. All it's going to take is, one, not a hospital, because that won't even do it anymore. People aren't really believing that. It would have to be something pretty gory, but they could pull it off. So even if we grant that maybe Trump has some agency here and he is in some way, actually dictating the terms of this thing, you have forces within Europe that are trying to sabotage the whole thing. You have elements within Ukraine, people who've lost family members, okay? People who currently still have family members being held hostage in Russia, which will do crazy shit, okay, in order to ensure that Western support continues. They'll do whatever it takes. Asymmetrical, guerrilla, false flag attacks, they will do it. Europe, in fact, this plan to put peacekeepers or reaction-based forces, they're just calling them troops, right? Did you notice how that shift? They initially were starting to call them peacekeepers, and then it went to reaction, and now it's just troops. We're going to put troops in there. And the reason why they're saying this is because they know that that would preclude any negotiation, any ceasefire deal. So, because the Russians are not going to agree to Ukraine's rearmament. Now, Putin did, I should say, propose that if you cede the annexed territories, then we don't really care. Like, we're willing to have a ceasefire if you cede the annexed territories. Now, of course, Europe in that case, because Europe is not going to let this go. You need to understand, this is it's not only existential if you believe the fantasy that most Western Europeans believe that Putin is coming for them next. Not only has Ukraine demonstrated that that's just not practical, especially with Russia's current military capability, maybe 10, 20 years as they can build up conventional forces, but Europe is now militarizing to the tune of an extra $1 trillion a year, it sounds like, for their military. So they're going full-blown war mobilization. So it's impossible that the Russians will be able to conventionally take all of Europe. Okay, it's a pipe dream. But what was I saying? So there's another motive there, though, that the Europeans need Russian oil and gas. They need it. They have to get their hands on it. And what they want is to control it. And so they are leveraging Slavic human resources to fight. They're leveraging Russians to fight Russians. And again, this is that forbidden knowledge that nobody wants to address. It's the elephant in the room. You have this guy Zelensky who comes around from who knows where, right? Speaks Russian. Speaks Russian. And this guy is just throwing meat waves at the Russians. It's not Western Europeans. Yeah, it's some guys, mercenaries who go and volunteer. But by and large, it's Slavic speaking people. And I'm assuming that a lot of these guys speak Russian. Okay? And so I think a lot of the guys that are getting mowed down by the commissars in Ukraine and taken against their will to die in a trench, I think a lot of those guys are actually Russian. All right? So there's so much disinformation. So for all of the, District 1 NAFO guys who like to dress up like girls and are hell-bent on this bloodletting continuing and are upset because they think that Trump is ceding to Vladimir Putin, don't worry. The carnage is going to continue, okay? You know what really is the most nefarious, malevolent thing about all of this? And there's two types of evil. There's the type of evil that just does evil and admits that I'm evil, right? Like, let's just say like slavery or something like that, It's like, yeah, this is bad, this is evil, right? We did this is evil. But there's another kind of evil, which pretends like they're not doing something evil, right? It's even worse because these guys who make these channels that are really pro-Ukraine and they just want the war to continue, they're not the ones who are getting taken, who are under martial law right now, who can't record videos of anything, who don't have elections, completely undemocratic, totalitarian society. You can justify it as because they're in a war zone, whatever. But you have these guys who are making obscene amounts of money with their little maps and talking about how they're sticking it to the Russians. They're not the ones dying on the front line, but they exhibit such alacrity for this chaos. And it's so Hunger Games. When you think about it, the Ukrainian war is the Hunger Games incarnate because you have these blue hairs, right, doing their little thing. They're placing their bets, they're dressing up in drag, whatever. I don't care what you do, but it's just a reality, right? And there's actually the spokesperson, the former Cirilio, they kind of flip back and forth. I don't know what they identify as now, but it's always something different. What was I even talking? The Hunger Games. This is it. Like you're selecting people from various districts to go and fight and die, and they have no choice in the matter. And there you are in District 1, with the juxtaposition of the decadence and the tyranny that kind of complement one another. The more decadence you have, the more tyranny that it begets. I mean, that's the true evil, okay? The true evil is, say what you want about the Russians. And I have to be careful here because people are going to misinterpret this. What I'm trying to say is the worst, most egregious forms of evil are always throughout history carried out with the best of intentions, okay? And right now you have a bunch of people who are upset because, oh no more Ukrainians are going to have to die. They're going to have to cede territory in this pointless war that they know they can't win. They know they can't win it, okay? Now, they might think they have some sort of plan in order to win it, and maybe their military commanders do. But when Russia has mined that place to holy hell, they have the manpower, they're unrelenting. The only possible strategy I could imagine is that maybe they're thinking that if they take out enough of their oil refineries, that they're going to be able to decimate's not the right word, destroy the Russian economy to the point where they can no longer continue to fight forward. But all that's going to do then is then trigger Vladimir Putin to use nuclear weapons. Maybe that's what the Ukrainians want at this point. Because remember, for them, it's already World War III. That's how they view it. That is their explicit vocalization about how they characterize this war. This is an existential war for them, even though nightclubs are still potentially a thing in Kiev, so I'm told. But it's just crazy what's going on. So there is no armistice possible for this conflict until somebody gets defeated. And unfortunately, in the case of Russia being defeated, there's a nuclear angle to that we have to consider. So unless the Russians are allowed to subsume those 4 annexed territories, I highly doubt that we're going to see any inkling of a ceasefire at this point in time. I think that's pretty much the gist of what I have to say about that. The narrative the prevailing overarching narrative is pro-Ukraine and pro-war. Regardless of what your algorithm is telling you, that's not the truth. And these forces will guarantee that even if Trump decides to do the right thing, by some people's standards, let's just keep it ambiguous, do the right thing by ending this conflict, there will be forces that step in and say, nope, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And when the war with Iran starts, which there's all kinds of misinformation and misquotes about that today in this talk, everything that we're being told about what may have been said or may not have been said in this call between Trump and Putin, it's really just media hearsay at this point. There was one point where they said that Putin and Trump agreed that Iran should not have the ability to destroy Israel. Well, what does that even mean when you think about it? I mean, how many nukes would you need to destroy Israel completely? I mean, do you mean decimate Israel? You mean hit it with a nuke? Does that entail nuclear weapons at all? Did they even say that? Or was that something that was completely taken out of context and falsely extrapolated from something that they said, maybe to the effect of, you know, maybe Putin agreed that Iran using a nuke on Israel would be bad. I mean, who wouldn't say that? Obviously, that's a given, right? So did they then make the jump to say, well, they agreed that Iran having nuclear weapon is bad? You know what I mean? So we don't know anything. It's just a charade. It's completely useless information. Everything Trump says is useless information. Like there is no, because he just waffles back and forth. You know, from day to day, he's contradicting himself. And I get strategic ambiguity, but then what's the point of even communicating with the public at all if you're going to say one thing and do the complete opposite the next day? And I'm not saying Biden is any better, okay, because these guys are just puppets, okay? They're puppets in the grand scheme of things, all right? So, yeah. This is why France is sending out a survival manual for every household, report claims, a booklet to give guidance on preparing for imminent threats, including armed conflict and natural disaster. Every country in Europe has done this. Eventually, they're going to do it in Canada. Once again, they used to send out these guides during the Cold War era. In fact, I have one here that somebody sent me. I've been meaning to do a video on it. But these guides are getting rather extensive. The Latvian one was, I think, the most comprehensive and in-depth in terms of wartime preparedness. I did a dedicated video on that very guide because I thought it was surprisingly in-depth. You know, usually these are very cursory, like this one, for example, talks about, you know, the generic stuff, like have, I don't know, they said 6 liters of water, which is like, but let's just read through this because this is interesting. The French government is reportedly planning to send a survival manual to every household in the country with instructions on how to prepare for an imminent threat, including armed conflict, a health crisis, or a natural disaster. The 20-page booklet, 20 pages. Get the Nuclear War Survival Skills book from CanadianPreparedness.com, or just you can download it for free offline. But if you want a hard copy, which I would recommend, get that book. And we have many other books, okay, and they're a lot longer than 20 pages. Will be sent to households before the summer. It will be divided into 3 parts on advice on how to protect yourself and those around you, what to do if a threat is imminent, with a list of emergency numbers, radio channels, and a reminder to close doors and windows if the threat is nuclear. Shit. I mean, okay, yeah, I mean, for radioactive fallout, that would minimize the alpha-beta exposure a little bit. And details on how to get involved in defending your community, including signing up for reserve units or firefighting groups. So this is all about war mobilization, right? It's an incremental rollout of creating a war economy. It will also suggest putting together a survival kit consisting of at least 6 liters of water. 6 liters? A dozen tins of food? Why a dozen? Batteries, a torch, as well as basic medical supplies. I mean, all of this stuff is shit you should have in your house anyways. Are we that dumb that we need to be told to do this? Wow. Including paracetamol? Is that I'm sure that's a name for like a common household medication that is just called something different. Paracetamol. I've done, what, 4 or 5 videos on Jace Medical? And why does paracetamol not come to mind? Anyways, compresses, it could be a translation, and saline solution, according to Europe 1 Radio, which reported the story. The quote, I quoted a spokesperson from the Prime Minister's office saying the purpose of this document is to ensure resilience of populations in the face of all crisis, whether natural, technological, cyber, or security related. Now, think about this. If this were to come out 3 years ago when this war started, how well would it be received? I mean, to think about how far we've come, that every European country is not only investing hundreds of billions of dollars into the war machine, but now sending out nuclear war survival kits. You think things are getting better? The Europeans are hell-bent on starting a war and sustaining a war with Russia. Macron has even suggested, and I'll quote, that war could come within months. Our country and our continent must continue to defend itself, to equip and to prepare if we want to avoid war. Nobody can say what will happen in the months or years to come. What I want is for us to be ready. What I want is for us to be protected. So France is the preeminent nuclear force outside of the United States in Europe, so they're trying to take the lead in this respect. Poland in the Baltics, as previously expected, are going to be backing out of the Ottawa Treaty, which is a landmine treaty, out of fears of Russia. So they want to put landmines across their borders because they're worried about the Russian threat. All of this stuff is really just setting them up so that when they do go and engage the Russians, possibly the Belarusians, because remember, a minefield is a defensive boundary, but it also serves an offensive purpose if you want to stop a counteroffensive while you're conducting an offensive. So if the Baltic states or Poland wanted to invade Belarus or Kaliningrad, but they wanted to prevent a Russian counterattack, and then you would mine the place so that they could not so easily break through your defensive lines. Allegedly, Russia has caught some NATO VIPs in the Kursk region, 30 of them. Now, this is from primarily Russian media, but they're claiming that about 30 NATO officers who served as spotters fell into a trap in Kursk. So, 30 NATO officers inside Russia. Perhaps that is why Trump is trying to make haste. Ursula von der Leyen gave a speech about how they have to compete with Russia, who spends 40% of its federal budget or 9% of its GDP on defense. The UK, I probably should have talked about this one first because it's kind of a sensational headline. The UK is reopening a command bunker. A secret historic command bunker at Barnton Quarry in Edinburgh is being considered by the UK's Ministry of Defence due to Ukraine war tensions. It was built secretly in the 1940s, declassified in 1955, and used during the Cold War as an emergency government hub, sheltering up to 400 politicians from nuclear threats. Now, allegedly, it's designed to withstand a 3-megaton bomb. They're concerned because, of course, modern nuclear weapons are potentially more powerful, even though I'm not sure what the largest nuke in Russia's arsenal is, but it can't be much more than 1 megaton because the megatonnage used to be much bigger, like the Tsar Bomba level, because of the inaccuracy. Now that they're more accurate, they don't need to be as big. In fact, it's much better to fire several mini nukes than it is one nuke because you basically expand your actual destructive radius. So they're talking about doing bunker warfare training, okay, in order to prepare for this eventuality. Army regiments are increasingly becoming interested in the training as the MOD conducts surveys of the site. It's designed, as I said, to withstand a 3 megaton blast. Still undergoing €6 million restoration since 2011, partially open to the public last year. Approximately 30 volunteers are working on refurbishment, seeking funding in order to see the project through. So I think that this is likely just subterfuge. The real bunkers are elsewhere. The ones that they're going to use now are most certainly elsewhere. And if they're not, then these people are dumber than I thought, which is very possible. Identified as one of Scotland's most critical bunkers, historically designated as the nation's administrative centre in the event of a nuclear war. Fairly substantial. Canada is announcing a $6 billion deal with Australia to develop Arctic radar missile detection systems. Now, Trump today, interestingly, in an interview, said that he prefers the Liberals and Mark Carney over that conservative guy, Pierre Poilievre. All I can say is he did Pierre Poilievre a favor, because the Liberal slogan here in Canada up until this point has been a vote for Poilievre is a vote for Trump. Well, now Poilievre has the perfect set of sound bites to counteract that argument. And Poilievre can say that Trump prefers, and I think Trump knew this, because I think people were telling him, look, you're pumping the Liberals in the polls. Right? The longer this trade war goes on, the more popular the Liberals get. And I came out the other day and I expressed my support for Pierre Poilievre of the Conservative Party, the first time I've ever endorsed a political candidate on the channel. And the reason why is quite simple, is because they've agreed to abrogate these very unjustified laws that seek to basically disarm the Canadian population, the law-abiding Canadian gun population. Now you have to ask yourself, and this is a part of that whole malevolence of all of this, is why is it that they don't want you to defend yourself? These same people who are very sanctimonious and pretend to be the righteous ones, who are encouraging Ukrainians to be scooped up against their will to go and fight and die for a cause so they can make videos about it, right? Why is it that these same people who are preaching about sacrosanct democratic virtues, why is it that they're the ones who want to take away your guns? You know what I mean? Like, you really got to think about the real evil that lies beneath all of that. You know, I'll almost take the evil that is just evil. The real evil is the one that's smart enough to disguise itself. That's the real dangerous kind of evil. You know, so, and I mean, even I think Malcolm X had something to say about that too, right? I can't remember the exact quote, but that's what he was on about, right? He understood that there is an exploitation on the left. They're far more cunning in their ability to commit atrocities. And why is it that they want to, that these people who are on their virtuous high horse are the ones who want to take your guns, deprive you of all your rights, and send you off to die in a trench? I mean, talk about 1984. Anyways, guys, that's what it is. That's what it is. The war's not going to end, unfortunately. It's going to get worse. And I'll be releasing an interview with a guest in the coming days that breaks it down scientifically, why these war cycles happen and when this war cycle that we're currently in is going to peak. This guy predicted that World War III would start back in 2000. He predicted, I shit you not, that the World War III would start in 2022 in a book that he wrote. And he has some very fascinating and terrifying things to say about what's around the corner and why you need to prepare for it and why you shouldn't wait for the next black swan flashbulb event to happen in the media to get your ass in gear. That's what I got for you today, my friends. Stay up, stay prepped, stay ready. Canadian Prepper out.